On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, it's officially yarn spinning season.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Raptors, coming to you on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On podcast feed. Now the number one sports podcast network covering your team every day, and we're presented by FanDuel. Play your game at FanDuel.com. It's Thursday, August 13th, and I'm your fill-in host, Zulfi, Sheikh, usually your humble host of the Raptors Postcast. Again, filling in for Sean Woodley as he takes some time off with his family. And with me, I'm very excited to say back yet again, Ian Finlayson, contributor for Sportsnet.ca, Blue Jays Nation, and a colleague of mine at Raptors Republic, maybe one of like 5 people in the entire world that might have known what the hell was going on with that Jays game and that play the other day. But Ian, how are you, my guy?
I'm doing well, thanks. What up, everyone? Pleasure to be joining once again. To talk some hoops. Like you were saying, very, very busy right now with the Jays season. You and I are also, busy covering the Toronto Tempo's inaugural season. So lots going on, lots of stuff to occupy my bandwidth and distract me from, what's been a pretty painful purgatory of a Raptors off season. But things are good, man. I'm excited to kind of kick it around and do some fun off season stuff. I was wondering in the intro, we're yarn spinning. Did you pre-plan that before I had my name in there, or was that were you playing off it?
Yeah, I'm gonna be so honest. I was playing off your nickname there, Yarn Spinner. I thought, you know what? It's the perfect way to introduce what we wanted to talk about, because it is true. We are gonna be spinning some yarn on today's show. Myself and Ian here, we're gonna be doing a draft of sorts, but not of teams or players, but it's gonna be of storylines. Hence, yarn spinning. We're inching closer to the start of the NBA season, so the schedule will be released actually later today on Thursday at 3 p.m. And that means that so much of what people have been wondering, the questions they've been asking, are going to start being answered, which makes it a lot to actually keep a track of and kind of focus on. So why not pick some of our favorite things that we'll be kind of keen on and keeping our eyes on as the season gets into a swing. So Ian and I are going to take turns picking narratives where that we're watching closely for one reason or another. Again, they can be about specific team like trend. They can be about a specific player on the Raptors, our team-wide storyline, and we'll kind of try to have some fun with it as we go on from there. So Ian, thank you for segueing me into this part of the conversation. But as the guest, I want to say the floor is yours. So what is the first Raptor storyline you'd like to draft here with your number one pick?
Yeah, we gotta play the music. So dog days of the NBA offseason, right? This is a fun exercise to kick around, and what a do, baby. I mean, it's Kawhi, right? You gotta start with Kawhi. Specifically for me, like, I'm gonna kind of preface this with, this is assuming that Kawhi ends up on the Raptors. I think that seems to be like the general information that's out there right now is that it's trending towards him winding up on the Raptors.
Not to cut you off. I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I'm kind of curious before problem. You get into your point. How do you feel about the idea of Kawhi eventually becoming a Raptor? Like, where is your personal pulse at? Because everyone seems to differ on this, and like you said, the information seems to be trending in one direction. But where is your general feeling at?
So I think it's kind of compartmentalized into 2 separate buckets, and one is as far as the basketball side of it is concerned, I'm over the moon. I'm so stoked to see Kawhi on this team for multiple reasons that I'm sure we'll probably get into a little bit in discussing this. Just such an immediate ceiling raiser in a few different areas, in lots of areas. And then on the other side, that definitely reigns supreme, that kind of feeling. But it's not like any of this stuff isn't icky, right? No matter how you try and spin it, there is always because I've heard all kinds of different kind of opinions on it, and kind of ways that people try to look at it, he's getting extra money. What are you going to say? No to extra money? Yeah, sure, but these are, at the end of the day, based on everything that's been reported and kind of, revealed originally by Pablo Torre and his Pulitzer Prize winning reporting, like, it's some shady kind of dealings, right? And especially, when they were asking for the Raptors for the same kind of stuff, reported by Doug Smith, the Toronto Star, back after the championship in 2019. So, yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like, and that kind of plays nicely into what my storyline is that I'm drafting first overall, and that's Kawhi's redemption arc in Toronto. Can Kawhi redeem himself, both for leaving, for all these kind of transgressions, alleged transgressions that have kind of occurred with the again, alleged salary cap circumvention and deal with aspiration. Because I do think, there's so much excitement around Kawhi coming to Toronto. And rightfully so. He finished 7th in MVP voting last year. It was an all NBA player. You're adding at least last season, a top 10 talent in the league to your team. Hugely efficient, obviously not at the peak of his defensive powers, but like he's, you're adding him to a team with a lot of great defenders already. There's a laundry list of reasons why Kawhi is a great acquisition, a great fit for this team. But to play devil's advocate, and if I were to, argue the other side, which I don't, my opinion is that I think he's a good fit and that it'll be a good basketball product. To kind of reverse it, there is still a plausible scenario where it doesn't go well, right? You look at the injury history, you look at he's an aging player, and you look at sometimes things just come out of left field, right? Sometimes things don't go the way you think they will. It's all kinds of possibilities exist. So just thinking about a scenario where Kawhi misses a whole bunch of games and he does underperform, like he has at times with the Clippers, kind of if there's some nagging injury stuff going on. Can also see a scenario where people get frustrated pretty quickly with this guy who left and now he's back and things aren't panning out. And suddenly the record is maybe it's lagging a little bit behind and close to 500 or something that lower than what people's expectations are coming into this. So yeah, can Kawhi achieve redemption in Toronto that has to be there's lots of ways you kind of mold the Kawhi storyline, lots of different directions we could take here for sure. But I think Kawhi being good and then the team being good and winning solves almost everything, right? If they're doing really good and he's absolutely crushing it like last year, I think people are going to warm up to it pretty quick, and it'll be pretty easy for him to get back in everyone's good books.
Yeah, and I think that last part there really does sum it up well in the sense of what the general perception of Kawhi being a Raptor again will be, because if they're winning, all's well, right? You know what I mean? There's a reason why fans were willing to give this guy free food and whatever he wanted before he left, and we're trying to convince him to stay. And there's plenty of fans who are probably all the stuff that Uncle Dennis and his team were allegedly asking for. A lot of people were saying, just give it to him because Kawhi took this team to the promised land, right? You were willing to kind of take some of the bad because of all the good that comes along the way. And that's really, from a perception perspective, this is what's going to come down to. What kind of extension the Raptors offer Kawhi, how does he look on this team? All of it's just so much more palatable if this team is winning and hitting their ceiling with Kawhi Leonard. And I think that'll be the interesting part of all of this, because from a basketball perspective, even with the concerns, there is a lot of it that just makes sense for what the Raptors were going to do. But, there's still so many fans who are on opposite ends of the spectrum of, Kawhi the person being on the Raptors. And you mentioned it. This is a guy who is a great basketball player, but he left, and some people can argue on unceremonious terms because he left a championship-winning roster to go back home, but he didn't do that before trying to ask the Raptors for just about everything. Even on the court, he was trying to ask them to make those trades for Russell Westbrook and Paul George. And then obviously now he's coming back and people are well, it's because he couldn't get the job done with the Clippers, and he's coming back to the team that's willing to give him the money, and they're going to try to make it happen again with him. So there's differing opinions, but I think overall the basketball of it all is interesting for Kawhi because it should make a lot of sense. But that brings me to the storyline that I'm watching for with Kawhi Leonard, and it's more of an on-court thing where I'm very curious about the Kawhi Leonard and Darko Rajakovic dynamic this season and what that is going to look like ultimately, because like we know that in many ways, Kawhi Leonard is going to be an upgrade on Brandon Ingram and like the type of player he was efficiency-wise on the defensive end and everything, but in the same sense that like Kawhi is also similar to Brandon Ingram in kind of like his hero ball style to a capacity. Now, in some ways, the Raptors want that. They want a player who can accomplish that, but it does deviate a bit from the style of play they like to go with. Like, Kawhi Leonard last year, even with James Harden and Darius Garland sharing time with him, his usage rate was 33.5%. The highest player on the Raptors was Brandon Ingram at 26.9. Like, it's going to be drastically different, and is Kawhi Leonard going to try to be willing to come down from that number? Probably, but we're going to have to see what it looks like, because even with Brandon Ingram, who is a lesser efficient player than Kawhi Leonard was, there was still so much push and pull where BI would deviate from the script, stick with the ball, and try to do some of that like hero ball type of stuff. And again, you need that to a capacity, but we're going to have to see how malleable Kawhi Leonard is in terms of fitting in within the style of play like the Raptors like to do. And I think the thing that's interesting to me is it's just so different. Like the Clippers were one of the slowest teams in the NBA last season. Their time to shot was last in the league. The Raptors were 10th in the NBA in terms of time to shot. They just like to play with more pace than the Clippers did. And Kawhi Leonard, I think, can fit that. But obviously, when it comes down to like those last second shots, trying to make something out of nothing, he's probably going to revert back to who he is and trying to take those shots for the Raptors. Obviously, again, you want him to do it to some capacity, but I think it's going to have to be a marriage where there is some push and pull, and we saw it not necessarily work as well as the Raptors wanted to at times with Brandon Ingram. So I'm curious to see how it's going to look like with Kawhi Leonard and Darko Rajakovic. Now, on the defensive end, I think it should be smooth sailing, but to your point about some of the concerns along the way, I do think there could be some bumps with Kawhi Leonard on the offensive end of the floor. So we're going to see what Darko Rajakovic's game plan is in terms of like how much they're kind of toggling that switch with being like, here, Kawhi, make something happen, but also fitting within the system that they like to play with.
Yeah, man, you mogged me with that one. The Leonard Rajakovic relationship dropped to number 2. Wow, a steep one spot fall in the draft. I love that one, dude. Joe Wolfon wrote that great piece about Ingram and Rajakovic's compromise. It was how Rajakovic and Ingram's compromises defined the Raptors season. It had the banger, watching him kind of move those possessions along is like watching him trying to coax honey out of an upturned jar like that.
Yeah.
and so the place my mind goes on that, like I was kind of thinking about this before, is I really like the Raptors like overall continuity. Like I think continuity is an underappreciated competitive advantage, like just generally speaking across sports. And if you look at the Raptors, like they have a lot of guys that have been around, like Jamal Shedd's going into his 3rd year, Battle going into his 3rd year, Jacoby, like you got a lot of guys across the roster that are kind of growing with the team. And I like that aspect of it. The one big exception is of course, they brought in Ingram last year. Now they're essentially replacing him with Kawhi. And I do find that super interesting because of, and you kind of laid it out there. Sure, it's not like of course a 1-to-1 comp or anything close to it, but there is like a similar mold in terms of and even when Kawhi first came to the Raptors in 2019, it was a bit of a similar situation where there was a team with all this continuity. They switch out a big piece. And the way Kawhi operated within that championship, the offense on that championship team was he was kind of insular. There was kind of the Raptors offense and the Kawhi offense. And I imagine it'll probably be something similar this season. And again, similar to what Ingram was last season. Which I think ultimately is a good thing. Like for one, Kawhi is an upgrade on Ingram. He shot just efficiency-wise almost 63%, 62.9% true shooting last season compared to Ingram's 57.3. When you stretch that out across the kind of volume that those guys are getting, that's a huge gap. Like that is a huge, like very significant gap. The pull-up shooting, of course, has been widely discussed with Kawhi and the kind of dynamism and the kind of options that's going to bring to their offense. The Raptors, of course, have been last in the NBA in pull-up three-point shooting for 2 consecutive years, like absolutely devoid of it. And crazy, I mean, obviously Emmanuel Quickley, who's really their only significant pull-up shooter with any kind of volume, was out for the playoffs last year. But the Raptors shot 3.9 pull-up threes per game in the playoffs, which is the same as what Kawhi averaged during the season. Like, I think they shot the same amount as a team as he did, at least during the playoffs. So, I think that it is a very interesting thing, and I think it's going to be a good thing to track throughout the season and keep an eye on as far as how much Kawhi is fitting in, how much they're adjusting, how he's used. Can they? I know they're like Ingram, they kind of wanted to ratchet up his efficiency, it seemed like a little bit with more cutting possessions, some more like different pick and roll ball handler stuff. They were trying to, he was one of the most used players off screens. So they were trying to mess with things a little bit, and 3-point volume as well. They wanted to ratchet up, which did at times, but never really came around. Kawhi already has a much higher 3-point volume, and maybe there are ways that they can kind of adjust how he's used. But if I had to make a prediction, I would guess that he probably, just like Ingram, he's been in the league a long time. He's very comfortable. He probably plays similar to how he's always played, more or less, right?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Another thing is Emmanuel Quickly, obviously the starting point guard, but he had less pick and roll ball handler possessions, as a scorer than Ingram did last season. He was at 3.2 and Ingram was at 3.6 per game. So I imagine that Kawhi will probably quite possibly handle in the pick and roll, at least score from there more often than Quickly. So I think that's a great one to track, man. You hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. I think everything that we both said, it's just interesting because I don't necessarily see Kawhi style changing all that much, but I do know Darko Rakovic does like his scripted stuff. He likes coming in with a game plan and he likes having a style of play. And we saw some of the friction, not necessarily from the perspective in the locker room or anything, but on the court at times when Brandon Ingram would deviate away from that. Again, Kawhi Leonard is much more efficient when it comes to deviating from the script and kind of self-creating. He's also a better playmaker or a more sound playmaker than Brandon Ingram was. So in terms of pick and roll ball handling and stuff like you mentioned, I think you're going to get more of that in terms of his usage, and you're going to get more creation opportunities there. So that'll be something you can see from him as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of that push and pull between Darko Rakovic and Kawhi Leonard. And I do think that it will probably work out. But like I said, if you're looking at possible concerns that could happen along the way, that might be one of them. It'll be interesting to see. All right, we got a lot more Raptors to talk about, including some of the other storylines we want to be drafting. So myself and Ian will do that as we break things down. So stay tuned for more Locked On Raptors on the other side of this break. All right, this episode of Locked On Raptors is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. And if you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bat for your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with all the games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping your eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going yard, and now is your chance to get to make more with your predictions before the first pitch. Looking at the Blue Jays, for example, they're kind of hot lately, and their bats are finally starting to find some momentum. So maybe picking a Blue Jay, hey, Vladdy can finally hit some home runs. Who knows? But if you do that and he goes yard, you can cash in. So if you're ready to play your game today, join in all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Ian, we're back for Locked On Raptors, drafting our top upcoming Raptors storylines this season. We've already drafted two. They were both Kawhi Leonard oriented, but now you have the next pick. What say you?
First, I liked that ad read, man. I still think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to hit 20 homers. There'll be one game left in the season, and I'll be expecting him to hit a
just go nuclear at the last game.
No, it's never over. But so for my second pick, cue the music. I'm going to draft the Vision 6-9 Revival because this is another subject that's been getting a lot of airtime lately. It's been out there in the Raptors sphere, and I mean, obviously they draft another archetypal Raptors forward in Alec Graves. You look at the construction of the team already with Collin Murray-Boyles added Kawhi Leonard as well, of course, 6'7", but close enough, right? They're all in that. They're all big wings and kind of that span that are, just similar similar types of players, play in similar styles as far as like defensive playmaking, great hands, and a knack for getting their hands on the ball. Guys that are generally like above average playmakers for their size. Guys that are going to be good rebounders, and then like maybe the biggest aspect of it, and the one that was kind of started by Nick Nurse, pioneered by Nick Nurse back during his tenure with the team, is like winning the turnover battle, right? Like you have all these like crazy defensive playmakers, they don't turn the ball over a ton. That's another thing about Kawhi, right? I think it was also Wolf on that put this stat out there that the only active NBA player with more career steals than turnovers. Pretty wild.
I think he has more steals than like fouls too, or something.
Yeah,
like that.
It's pretty stupid. There's a few players that have like done it. Sweet. Okay, sorry about that. No, I was just saying I think there's a couple players that have done it before, like Tony Allen and Trevor Ariza, and there's one other. I think it's 4 all time, but yeah. So it's just kind of funny when you look at the Raptors depth chart, right? Like, and it's been like this for a long time, obviously. More or less, but like the top and bottom are the weakest areas of the team. Like you look at Jakob Poeltl and the questions surrounding like his health issues and corresponding underperformance. You look at Emmanuel Quickly, who probably gets like less ire from Raptors fans, at least of late, but also has been the target of that at times, and just generally probably the biggest issue is just his lack of like on-ball juice and creation. Both for himself and especially for others when it comes to like making, more complex reads and getting the ball to more dangerous areas of the floor. So yeah, those two kind of on opposite ends of the consternation. Are you still got me there?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, I think it's muted for just a moment, but hopefully no more mic issues here. Yeah, so those two. Those two really are kind of like the outliers, right? When you look at the roster, and then the middle is full of like all of those players we just detailed. So I kind of like my overarching thought about this is that like, kind of like anything can work if it's done the right way. Like, I don't think just because Vision 6-9 didn't pan out the first time when, it was Pascal and OG and Precious Achiuwa and Chris Boucher and like that iteration of the team, doesn't necessarily mean that this one can't work. And I think that like generally speaking, the kind of like assimilation of NBA play styles is kind of misguided. Like when you look at like kind of like the copycat nature of the league and that whole kind of like idea, obviously Boston and Golden State at different times kind of like ushered in this big 3-point revolution, and you had teams that were just trying to like jack up the 3-point volume to unheard of levels. After that, the OKC Pacers final in 2025, I think is a pretty good example of this as well, where it was like crazy high pickup points, which of course the Raptors were on that as well early that season, along with like the Trailblazers and other teams. But like, crazy high pickup points, ratcheting up the pace. That kind of became the new zeitgeist of the league, and like thing that teams tried to look to and orient themselves towards. So like I think that the idea, like for one, I think it's also been referred to, I believe Darko's even commented before in pressers, like if you're trying to copy and you're trying to look back and do something that teams have already done, to choose a direction that you're going to build your roster and like philosophy of play around, you're already kind of behind the 8 ball. Like you need to be looking forward, if anything. So that's one thing. And I just generally speaking, don't really think like there's any one like orthodoxy or one meta per se for the league. Like I think that there's so like it's back to the old Dwayne Caseyism, right? But like there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's lots of different ways to accomplish things and paths you can take to get a goal done. And I think as long as like you have the right players to play a certain way, and they're good players, of course, too, you can get it done more or less. So the big question here kind of this is like, can they access the upside that they've always kind of, I guess, seemingly felt is there with Vision 6-9?
and avoid some of those previous drawbacks with the on-ball kind of creation that Leonard provides, because that was maybe the main thing that they lacked, right? When they kind of did this the first time. And they do have a 7-footer in Jakob Poeltl this time that they added towards the end of those previous teams. But I think, like, and again, this goes back to the pull-up 3-point shooting again. God, if they take almost a league average amount of pull-up threes this year, that would be fantastic. Like, they took 4.9 per game last year, which was, I think, the second to last place team was 7. So like, like if they can even, like, I mean, quickly, he took only 2 per game last year, and he had averaged over 3 each of the previous 2 seasons. And he also shot a lot worse on them. So quickly, I imagine that normalizes a bit and probably gets back to 3. Kawhi took 4, so that's 7 right there. They can cobble together like another pull-up 3 or 2 out of, like, Scottie jacks the odd one up, Shed takes them, Jacoby battle.
RJ Barrett probably.
RJ, I hope not, but like if they can, like, get that to, like, because I think about the median mark of the league was like 9 pull-up threes a game. So if they can even get, like, to kind of like an average amount and modernize the offense that way a little bit, because you think about teams playing drop on them, start of the playoffs, like, Mobley and Allen just, like, sitting all the way back in the paint, and daring Jamal Shed to, come off these unders and take pull-up threes. If they can, like, punish that and tease defenses out a little bit more, I think that goes a long way to opening up everything else that Vision 6-9 can provide, like the cutting and corner crash and dunker spot stuff, and just they can get super creative. So yeah, it'll be super interesting. The one other note I have here on the Vision 6-9 thing, as far as, like, Leonard provides more juice there, but also Scottie Barnes, I think, maybe even has, like, obviously, like, different players. Like, Pascal Siakam was a great playmaker as well, but Barnes, just with his, like, vision and hair trigger passing, plus if he can kind of keep up what he did in the playoffs last year, he averaged, like, double the drives in the playoffs that he did in the regular season. It was up from 7.8 to 16 a game. He also drew almost twice the amount of free throws. It was up from like almost 4 to almost 8 free throw attempts per game in the playoffs. Like, is that going to be sustainable over a longer stretch when, like, the competition isn't ramped up to, like, absolute max? Like, I don't know, but seeing that from him was obviously incredibly encouraging. And just, like, because in the past he was never really drawing fouls because he wasn't able to get his hits past defenders, right? Like, the defenders were staying in front of him, and he wasn't getting the calls he wanted a lot of the time. If that can inch forward and progress more as it did in the playoffs, like, I think they got a stew going, man.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because it's again, you just teed it up for me right here, because that was going to be my next pick, and that is my next pick in this storylines draft and I didn't want to overthink it here. It's, can Scottie Barnes keep up that playoff intensity for an extended period? And, like, you talked about some of the stuff he was able to accomplish, just the raw numbers here: 24 points, 6 rebounds, 8.5 assists, a steal, nearly 2 blocks, and he did all of that on 61% true shooting throughout those 7 games against the Cavaliers. Like, you mentioned it, he was a battering ram when he needed to be. He was a Swiss Army knife on both ends of the floor when he needed to be, pinballing his passes around. And the thing that I enjoyed most about it is that after that series was over, he looked back at it in such, like, a revelatory way, like almost like he had an epiphany, because in their exit interviews, I asked Scottie, I'm like, where do you feel like you grew the most this season? And he said, screw the entire season. I'm talking about the playoffs. He said that the playoffs was where he felt like his level of aggression took another level, and then he flipped his mentality, is the phrase that he used. And, like, I'm curious to see this season, what does that look like in terms of, like, can he flip that switch more often in, like you said, lower stakes games throughout an 82-game regular season? Because when he did, this guy looked like a bona fide top 10 to 15 player. And then if he can keep that up for big chunks of the regular season, like, what does that mean long term? Does fatigue add up for him when it comes to playoff time? Is he able to sustain that level of energy when they need it in those higher stakes situations? But, like, at the very least, it's probably not going to happen for 82 games, but can you get it for, like, 60, 55? What does that look like? Even if it's a kind of slightly toned down version of that, you're probably going to need it on some nights, especially with Kawhi Leonard's on this team and he's load managing certain games, like you're going to need Scottie Barnes to scale up his game and be that 1A that you saw in the playoffs and kind of raising the floor of this team in those non-Kawhi minutes and non-Kawhi lineups. So I'm very curious to see what he's able to accomplish in terms of just like, we've talked about it in the past where like, yes, Scottie, look at this, Scottie. When you're aggressive, look what can happen. We've said this plenty of times for him, but it's almost like he got his own proof of concept, and it's one thing for people to say it, it's another thing for him to actually experience it to that degree. And then coming out of the playoffs, just the way he talked about that experience and the way he, like, again, it felt like almost like an epiphany of sorts where it was like, oh, wow, I can really do this. And when I do, look at what I'm accomplishing. And he kept using the phrase where it's just like, I got to do what I need, like whatever is needed for the team to be able to win. And I think he's figured out that if he can fill in as many gaps as possible, if he can plug those holes, which he's capable of doing, this team can just hit another gear. And that just, it starts and stops with him. He's the straw that stirs this drink. And if Scottie Barnes can be that Scottie that we saw in the playoffs for an extended period, this is a very, very dangerous Raptors team. And I think that's why I want to be tracking this for the whole season.
I mean, I think it said the playoffs are the crucible, right? They distill players down to their purest form and kind of take, all the other superfluous and like extra bits away. And it's just like, this is what they are. And the fact that kind of trial by fire of the playoffs revealed that Scottie was that. It's pretty damn encouraging. And yeah, like I wholeheartedly hope that we see Scottie still like upright boogieing on guys and getting past them and getting to the line and all that stuff during the season. I'm going to go ahead and I have no segue here, which is very disappointing to myself, but and go ahead and with my next pick, if that's all clear with you.
Yeah, you can take your next pick and then we'll take a break after that.
Sounds good, man. I'll keep it short and sweet as I can, actually. So up next, I guess the 5th overall pick in the draft, I'm going with Jamal Shedd's ceiling. Like what is Jamal Shedd's ceiling? What can he achieve? Very intriguing player, fan favorite, obviously, for his like grittiness. And I think that's one of the reasons why he kind of intrigues me, because like grit is one of those immeasurables that I think is very meaningful and does go a long way. I think Raptors fans have seen it time and again with players throughout the history of the franchise, especially through the championship era. So just like, that continuous work, that continuous fight to get like the edge on every possession, that grind, you would think it translates out at the gym and that he's working hard to improve. And for him, like, I think the biggest thing to improve pretty obviously is the efficiency. Like he managed to take huge strides as like a playmaker and as a decision maker with ball last year. But he's just not threatening enough to really weaponize that fully. Like his 49.1 true shooting percentage last season was 4th lowest in the NBA among qualified players. So pretty tough. I don't even think it needs to, like, league average is 58%. So almost 10% below. I don't think it has to be league average or even that close, but just
better,
just not that low. Yeah. Just like a few percentage points up, I've hit a few more threes. I don't love the floater personally. I actually don't have the numbers up in front of me right now, but I've looked at it before, and he shoots a really low percentage on those floaters. He kind of stopped taking them as much towards the beginning of the season, and then they kind of like snuck back into his game later. But like his driving and playmaking were dynamite last year. Yeah. Like it was so he led all players in total assists off the bench. I think Isaiah Collier averaged more, but he only played like 40 games, and yeah, had the most total. I wrote this big piece on him last year. Like I watched all of his assists to like the midway point of the season. And he had at the midway point of the season, he had double the amount of assists from the short mid range. And he had a 10% jump in advantage assists, where like his assists were actually setting up teammates with like quality open looks. And he was taking less floaters. Like his floaters from the mid range were down. He's got such like a lightning quick first step. Like I feel like, he can get past guys. There's one play in specific that I always think of. They ran 77 skip for him. It was against the Houston Rockets. And the way he like hit the gap off the handoff was like, whoa. He was like lightning through there. So he's going to get by guys. He's going to get into the mid range. but like defenders are, if you can't threaten to score from there, either getting to the rim or like with a pull up three to kind of like open up those opportunities even more, teams are just going to play off him and like dare him to shoot. And that's what we saw in the playoffs too, right? Again, you know, it reveals players' weaknesses. But so yeah, I think just like if he can just get that efficiency up a little bit, I mean, I'm sure that's probably the goal. But and then the last note I have here on Shed is, and this was just like a weird thing that I saw while I was digging into his stats, but he actually shot like way better on pull-up threes than catch and shoots last season. He shot over 36% on pull-up threes and 31 on catch and shoot, which is kind of just like a funky, like it's probably just super noisy small sample, right? But yeah, interesting.
I mean, I kind of see some like credence to that in the sense that like when he was taking those pull-up threes, it was usually, like you said, teams going under, just dropped way back, not really respecting him. He had the open space for it, which is like catch and shoot opportunities usually come within the flow of the offense, just more like with more pace and speed. So like players are probably closing out to him more instinctually. There's more contest against his catch and shoot looks versus the pull-up stuff. It's like it's very intentional about how he's being guarded and trying to make it pay. But I it's not my next pick, but like I had it written down here too, just like tracking Jamal Shedd's growth on the offensive end. What does it look like? Has he added any go-to moves? I agree with you wholeheartedly that like I want the floater to be a thing. He just hasn't given us any proof of concept to see that it'll be a thing, especially at his size. I think it'll be tough for that to come around. But on the flip side, like I think if he can start trusting his speed and athleticism more, the drives are there. He like people like to compare him to Kyle Lowry, and I don't think he's necessarily the type of player, obviously. But in terms of just like the way he can sneak certain angles and squeeze layups up at the basket and actually get his shots off, I think he should trust that more, the same way Kyle did, and how Kyle was able to finish effectively despite his lack of size, even though Kyle was a bigger and stronger player for the most part. I think that's something I would like to see from Jamal Shed. Just trust those instincts, trust your athleticism to look to create those scoring opportunities. And like you said, it opens up so much of the rest of his game. And just if it takes up that efficiency and can just be a net neutral even on offense for the most part, I think it really does lead to a lot of positive outcomes for this Raptors, especially from a bench perspective. All right, Ian, we're going to take one more short break and then dive into my final pick of the storyline draft. And then we can talk about maybe some quick hitters if we have some final thoughts. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to continue Locked On Raptors. All right, we're back for Locked On Raptors with Ian Finlayson, drafting our top storylines for the upcoming season. And I have the last pick here, Ian. And I have a couple options to choose from here because obviously there's lots that you can talk about with the Raptors. And I'm debating between two specifically. It's RJ Barrett in a contract year. What does that look like? Or year two Collin Murray-Boyles. And I think ultimately I am going to go with year two CMB. And seeing what that looks like for the Raptors.
Both very compelling, for sure.
Both obviously going to be very important for the Raptors this season and what their outlook looks like. But I think RJ Barrett, the thing is, like, it's probably, at least on court, it's going to look a lot like we already saw what it was next to Brandon Ingram, right? RJ's going to be a great play finisher. He's going to be asked to scale down some of his game most nights. But then the nights where either Kawhi Leonard's taking a night off, or, you know, like it's not a great shooting night for him, you can see RJ Barrett scale up his game some more. Like he talked about it, the phrase he kept using was like doing more with less, and he proved that he can do that. And I think that's going to be the case. I think the more compelling thing with RJ Barrett is just like the Raptors, like front office of it all. It's like, if you see this guy raising his value even more, like you have to make a decision. Can you find a way to keep him financially? And if not, do you look to move him at the trade deadline and try to get some value back? Do you like wait till the end of the season, risk it, and see if you can get him on a discount? Because RJ Barrett has made it very clear he wants to stay on this team. So are they willing to find a middle ground here? But if not, like, and he wants like what he's worth, rightfully so, if that's the case, like what can the Raptors do to make it work out? I think is going to be the interesting thing to keep in mind throughout the season. But again, on court, I think it's going to be largely similar in terms of what we saw from RJ Barrett last year. The reason why CMB to me is just a bit more compelling is because to me, like the regular season, we saw not very little of what CMB's potential is, but it was muted in a sense because of injuries being a big issue. He played only 57 games. his fit, like his role was constantly changing because it had to be navigated around Jakob Poeltl's health. CMB started 22 games last year. Who knows what that's going to be like this year? Is he going to have more continuity in his role coming off the bench because Jakob Poeltl's healthy and presumably starting? CMB was kind of thrown in and out of the rotation in terms of starting, coming off the bench, who he was playing next to. He was playing power forward minutes at times. He was playing center minutes at times. So I think having some more like role continuity and a simpler like role definition should be able to help him and see what we can get. And then obviously he's coming off a hell of a playoff run himself. Again, the raw numbers here for CMB in the playoffs through his 7 games were 14.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal, a block, and he did that on 69% true shooting because the guy was finishing everything at the rim. Scottie Barnes was feeding him assists in the paint, and CMB was just basically putting everything up at the basket, and it was going down. And can we see that like heightened degree of play from Collin Murray-Boyles over the extent of an entire regular season? Can we see him kind of deal with the rigors of having to play center minutes? Because again, behind Jakob Poeltl, there isn't really much of a center rotation. So CMB is going to have to do it one way or the other. And can he handle that for an entire season without dealing with more injuries like he did as a rookie? And then like just, I'm very excited to see like where has he grown as a player in terms of offensively. We saw some of the in-between stuff come around in the playoffs, that push floater he was developing and working on. But can he continue to at least try to space the floor and attempt to do that? Early on in his rookie season, he shot the 3 well. That kind of tailed off, and we didn't really see it from there. Does that come back into play? What is he doing on ball as a decision maker? Even though CMB didn't play in Summer League, Darko Rajakovic and that coaching staff were talking pretty highly about the fact that like they want CMB making decisions, being a bit of a hub of sorts, similar to Scottie. Are we going to get to see that in year 2 from him? So I think there's just so much more in play as to like what's new that we can see from Collin Murray-Boyles, which is what compels me the most, and that's why year 2 CMB is what I'm really excited about here.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm absolutely fascinated to see what Collin Murray-Boyles' role is in year 2. I think right now he's definitely obviously going to be getting some minutes at center. Like we'll see how that kind of all shakes out in terms of like the Trace Jackson Davis and Nate Biddleness of everything. But I think it's pretty safe to say, like, if I were to guess right now, he'll probably be closing games at center to start, like similar to what it was last season. I'm also like very curious kind of what the optimal role is for him. Because if I were to say it, and I feel like, I mean, this is like kind of like maybe pigeonholing him with his size a little bit, like maybe, I don't know, maybe he is a big, but like I think that he's probably like optimized as like a big wing, akin to like the role Scottie plays. Like if you think about it, you talk about his rim finishing in the playoffs there during the regular. So he was listed as a big on cleaning the glass because I guess he played what makes sense. He played the most possessions at center last season. And he graded out in the 51st percentile with 69% rim finishing as a big. So that's among bigs. So he was like a dead on like average finisher as a 6'7" rookie as a big when compared to other bigs. Whew. Okay. And then in the playoffs, that jumped up to 76th percentile. And he was finishing 74% at the rim in the playoffs. I just think when you take that and like apply it to if he was getting more of those looks as like a big wing, like early seals in like semi-transition, the way Scottie does, like bullying mismatches, like I think that would be pretty scary. He's a heady passer too, like when he gets those kind of touches. Obviously he can guard like all across the spectrum. Like he showed that he was elite both at like stepping out and at physically like hanging in with bigs down low with his strength. So like very, very quick and physical player and very malleable in that respect. But like the question that I keep coming back to is like, what is the optimal role for him? Like he's very obviously a great basketball player. And I think either way, like whether they play him more at center or more as like a big wing / forward, like I think he'll be fine. Like I think he's going to be good and he'll contribute and like find a way to fit a role for the Raptors really well. But like also everything does count, right? Like all these reps count. It all does build into this process of development that ultimately results in the player that he is, right? That we are everything we do. So like I can't help but think like should they be playing him at center that much? Like, it's probably like over-indexing a little bit. I would like to see some more reps for him, like on ball though, face up. Like, obviously, the development of his driving game is something that a lot of people have close eyes on, and was like pretty, pretty prevalent and present at South Carolina, right, during his college career. Like, he was a pretty prodigious driver, like one of the better ones in college that season, right? So we saw flashes of that at time in the playoffs, both in like traditional ways where he would turn the corner off actions on the perimeter, and also with him like flashing to the middle and the Raptors playing this super funky like interior passing game where he would like get a little bit of space off of Jared Allen or off of Evan Mobley, and they'd play off and he'd boom, like punch the gap and take it right at their chest kind of thing, right? So like, I'm really intrigued to see how some of that goes. Darko Rajakovic talked at his season end about they wanted to give him more on-ball reps. They'd had him running pick and roll, and they want him to develop that. So, I think his ideal role eventually is as a big wing, and I think that kind of will naturally be how he slots in one way or another eventually. But the path there is definitely intriguing.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that path. But what I am excited about as well, and we didn't really touch on it, is like, that's just the players he gets to learn from now and figure out what his NBA role is going to be. Again, behind Scottie Barnes, now hopefully behind Kawhi Leonard as well. I just think the sky's the ceiling for CMB. And like you said, like, there may be some bumps along the way, but all these reps should be meaningful for him, and all of them will lead to a positive outcome because he has the talent for it to do so. So I'm excited to see what happens with CMB. But that wraps it up for our drafting of storylines. Ian, before we do wrap things up super quick, I wanted to see, like, what other like storylines did you have that we didn't necessarily mention? You can kind of quick fire rattle these off, and we'll see if we have some extras.
You know, we actually, like, between the two of us, touched on a lot of what I had, because one of the other ones I had was the Collin Murray-Boyles development arc, which you got off with your last pick there. The one other kind of note I had that I had in reserve here, and of course for all the sickos, is just Raptors 905, and specifically Raptors 905 continuity, which is like something I wrote about last year as well. But like, will Tyreke Key and AJ Hoggard and Tyson Degenhart be back? Like, Degenhart, they were all with the summer league roster, right? Tyreke Key this would be his third year with the 905. He's been in summer league for a few years and with York for a couple of years now. I do know specifically, just from talking to people a little bit, like, the organization really is fond of both Tyreke Key and Tyson Degenhart. Like, they kind of like, those were guys that they found and like see as like kind of diamonds in the rough a little bit. Key obviously was out in Belgium, crazy shooter. I think like Charlie Brown Jr. said it in his first year better than anyone else. He can shoot that mother, and then Degenhart, like, just a crazy efficient, shot 62 plus true shooting in college, Boise State's all-time leading scorer, really good touch, just a really smart player as far as like how he gets to his stuff, really methodical. And then he shot 60, he had one of the best true shooting percentages for his position in the G League last year, over 64% true shooting. So interesting to see if those guys will be back. Like, you look at, just going to touch on the Exhibit 10s really quickly. Like, so far, the ones, I believe, unless I'm missing anything, the ones that have been reported are Nate Biddle, Namari Burnett. Michigan put it out there that he has an X10, and then Andre Jackson Jr. was the recent Exhibit 10 signing. So they have 3. They can sign up to 6 players to an Exhibit 10 at a time, but I think they did 7 last year, and there's a loophole where it's like you can only do 6 at one time, but then once you waive and sign, you can like have 6 at one time, and you can kind of almost have as many as you want.
Like cycle through them a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So because last year Tyreke Key and Quincy Guerrier and as well as Degenhart and Hoggard were all Exhibit 10 guys. And obviously, I think Guerrier was for back-to-back years. Key was last year and has been on the team for a couple years. So, like, I'm wondering, like, just how many guys get brought back. Like, I think continuity, as I said before, like, is an important, competitive advantage. Just, like, building on stuff year over year, getting these ingrained habits and these connections with the team and knowledge of the system, and having guys that are already acclimated to that, being able to kind of, like, pass it on to people that are entering. and they've always had at least a few returning players with the 905. So obviously 3 Exhibit 10 spots already opening up. I'm very curious to see if any of those few guys, Key, Quincy Guerrier, Tyson Degenhart, AJ Hogarth, get any more of those Exhibit 10 spots. Also, real quick, I forgot to go into the details. We talked about Exhibit 10s last time I was on here as well, and I shouldn't just assume that everyone knows. Exhibit 10 contract is essentially a training camp deal, and then
it's like a tryout, basically.
Yeah, and then if players are waived and come back and join the organization, in this case the Raptors G League team, they get a bonus, right? So normally the G League salary, I don't actually know specifically off the top of my head what it is right now, but it's like pretty low. It's 40 or 50,000 or something. And then the Exhibit 10 gives them, it used to be like a $70,000 bonus. I think it's even more now. It's probably like 80 or more.
Yeah.
So it gives them a nice little bonus on top of the G League salary to incentivize them.
It's good incentive to stay within the organization. Ian, I appreciate you going on a deep dive into the 905. It's close to my heart. It is absolutely sicko season stuff, but thank you. I'll quickly just rattle off a couple last storyline things I had that we didn't touch on. Jakob Poeltl's health, I think, is the one that's going to obviously be important. See what it looks like a full season. He did say in his end of season avail that he feels like he has a good handle on it now, but also that it is something that he's just going to have to keep managing for the rest of his career. And the last couple of seasons, even before the back injury, he played 57 games and 50 games, right? So his health has been moving in the wrong direction for the most part. So here's hoping for a healthy season from Jakob Poeltl. Year 3, Jacoby Walter, who looks swole as hell now. If you looked at his YouTube channel and he posted a training video vlog thing, the guy looks like he's put on some weight and put on some strength. And if we can get a stronger Jacoby Walter who can no longer have to deal with the fatigue, I think that could be really fun too. And especially now he doesn't have Ochai Agbaji and Grady Dick kind of over his shoulder fighting for the same minutes. I think that could be really nice for Jacoby Walter to have more of a simplified role. And then some of the other ones I had here really quick, kind of similar to your point here, is can the Raptors find some diamonds in the rough this season? Whether that's, like you said, Elijah Martin being on an NBA contract, Nate Biddle, is he going to be with the team? Trey Jemison, two-way guy off the Knicks, that's kind of fun. Andre Jackson Jr. is a guy who's been in the NBA for a cup of coffee. Can that turn into anything? Trace Jackson Davis, to bring him back, that should be interesting as well. And I think that pretty much covers it here in terms of the last couple storylines I had going for the Raptors. But Ian, I think it's going to be a very fun season because there's just so many different ways you can look at it. Obviously on the top end, there's the Kawhi Leonard of it all. There's Scottie Barnes ascension. But just up and down this roster, there's little narratives to keep an eye on. Like we mentioned, RJ Barrett's contract year and what that looks like. What kind of leap Jamal Sheck can make. Obviously, Collin Murray-Boyles. We didn't even talk about the rookie, specifically Allen Graves, in much detail. That what can he do in terms of building out a role on this roster, especially a roster that's trying to be competitive right away. Can he kind of crack that rotation consistently on a night-to-night basis? I think that'll be really interesting here. But before we wrap things up, let the fine people know where they can find you. And just for funsies, give me a super, super quick prediction on how many national TV games you think the Raptors can get. I asked Kai the same question as well yesterday, but keep in mind last year they had something like 3 or 4. So give me a quick guess.
With Kawhi and all the controversy, I'll go 4.
Okay, yeah, so right where they were.
Yeah, I'll go 4. I'm not gonna go too high or push it like crazy there, but yeah, I think with all the controversy, it'll drum up a little bit, and they'll be and they're competitive again now too, so they'll maybe get a few. Yeah, like you said, absolutely no shortage of yarn to spin, especially a lot of intriguing sicko storylines like we were talking about just there that you and I will surely be covering in much more detail as the season approaches, as at Raptors Republic, which is one place you can find our work, also covered at Sportsnet. Absolute pleasure always to join, man. Love chopping it up and talking hoops with you.
Of course, thank you for hopping on, Ian. But that does it for myself, Zulfi, Sheikh, and Ian Finlayson. Thank you to everyone who tuned in as we hold down the fort for Sean Woodley, and he will be back next week. Don't forget to comment below if you have any thoughts. Do you have any other favorite storylines that we may or may not have mentioned? And if there's anything we missed, and if you agree or disagree with the ones we did pick. But thank you for making Locked On Raptors your first listen every day. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Wes, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything in between to keep you the most informed about the NBA. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network covering your team every day. But for now, that does it for this episode of Locked On Raptors. We'll see you all again very soon. Peace out.